As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We're privileged to have a returning guest tonight. Jeff Clark, Senior Precious Metals Analyst at goldsilver.com, is joining us here again on Reluctant Preppers. We're going to address two major topics with Jeff tonight. The first being what the intention seems to be growing and building even in the popular culture, both from Hollywood and television and major corporate media interest in the issues around economics and gold, and also the real-life impacts that are happening right now in India with governmental policies that could be causing a future seismic shift from historical interest in gold and cash there into silver. Jeff, thank you for joining us here again on Reluctant Preppers.
It's great to be back with you, Dunnigan.
You recently wrote a very intriguing article that caught our attention, and we wanted to have you on if you could give us some insight into it. The article was about the most important lessons you learned from the movie Gold, and we wanted to get you to first weigh in on us with what is going on with, in your view, the apparent uprising of interest in productions, both movies, television, and news, about finance that are coming out. I mean, just in the last year or so, we've had The Wolf of Wall Street major motion picture, The Big Short, new one, Gold, that came out, and a Madoff mini-series on cable TV. There just seems to be a burgeoning interest or concern. What is it about finance, and specifically about sort of these major power players in finance, that seems to be capturing the popular interest at this time?
Well, that's a great question, and a very insightful question on your part, because you're right. I think all those movies have just come out in the past couple years, Gold being the most recent. And Gold, by the way, is a fun movie to watch. I guess we should say spoiler alert here, so if you haven't seen it, we'll probably give it away. But it's a fun movie, and there are clearly some lessons you can learn from that. But we go into that later if you want. But as far as your direct question, that's a very good point. A lot of these things are coming out that are based on true stories. They're fun to watch as a moviegoer. I really enjoyed the movie Gold. I enjoyed the others as well. But you're right. There's a greater awareness of all this coming out. I think part of it is that they just make darn good movies. These stories do.
Sure.
But part of it is, think about it. We've always had high risk. We've always had bubbles. And, these are good stories, but we've always had levels of risk and bubbles in our society and in our history that you really have to pay attention to. Look at the NASDAQ, for example, in the 90s. We all know that went up like 1,700%. The S&P went up 1,500%. Even bond prices went up like 1,200%. The Home Builders Index in the early 2000s was a 10-bagger. So there's always been bubbles throughout history, and that's kind of what we're seeing now. And I think that the point is that we have to be aware of this, and I think most of your constituency is, but our job is to protect ourselves. And that's exactly what you're doing. And when it comes to your financial situation, I think that's, a great way to do that, is obviously with gold and silver. I think, what I feel when I hear your question is that, okay, risk is getting much higher in the system right now. And gold is usually about defense, but I think this time around it's going to be about offense. And I just don't think that enough people are really aware of this. Even though these make good movies, how many moviegoers do you think leave from the theater watching that movie and think, you know what, I need to do a little bit more preparation, or I need to buy a little bit more gold and silver? I'm laughing because I'm quite sure that 99% of people don't leave with that reaction. And so therefore, we're going to repeat the mistakes of the past, which means there will be crisis, which means that you have to be prepared in more ways than one. Financially, I'm prepared with gold and silver, but there are other ways to prepare, as you guys know very well. And I think that's the real lesson.
It reminds me of a video starring your founder, Mike Maloney, a few years ago, where he said, I can't really reach everyone. I can't touch everyone because I can't get to, I think he called Joe Sixpack, who's in his beer and football-induced coma. He won't wake up until it's too late, till the popular sentiment is finally tipped over and it becomes obvious it's too late at that point to help him.
That's right. That's right, because 90% of, the people rush in at the end, and that's why 90% of your gains in any asset that bubbles are always made in the last 10% of time. So, we're in the very, very early stages of a gold and silver bull market. But the time it gets to the end of it, when everybody's rushing in, everybody's talking about it, just like we were at internet stocks back in the late 90s, early 2000, that's when you're going to see the biggest part of the move, is when all those people would jump on board.
There does seem to be something that I would imagine most moviegoers that go to that particular type of movie, though, are coming out with, and that's sort of a reinforced cynicism or skepticism about the transparency versus power of the elites and what the real motives are, what's really driving things. People have talked within the preparedness community for some time about manipulated gold and silver markets, that sort of thing. But when you see these movies about these power players who pull the strings from behind the scenes and play by a completely different rule book and are basically untouchable, for most of the way that they play out their schemes, it does seem to reinforce people's perception, and perhaps it's an accurate one, that in fact a lot of the big decisions and the big movement that's made are being made by elites, by power players, and not by or on behalf of the ordinary person. So, for whatever that's worth, it gets back to are these movies depicting? You mentioned they're based on true stories, so they're not just in that sense. People talk about conspiracy theory almost like it's one phrase, just conspiracy theory. But if these are actual orchestrated mastermind plots that were actually carried out, then those were actual conspiracy facts. So I think that also causes kind of that solidification in the popular sentiment about things aren't as rosy as they may appear to be. So even in that bubble time, people seems to be acknowledging that there's more going on behind the scenes than what you see on the surface of the bubble. If we go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was just going to say, I agree, and I like your phrase, conspiracy fact. I love that. We got to trademark that or something. That's very true, and I think there is a consciousness out there for that. But again, I think I go back to the point that most people I know, and I work in the gold industry, but most people I know outside of my employer do not own any gold and silver whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Right. They're not paying attention to it at all. And I would take that one step further. I would apply it to all these other things that you're bringing up about economics and monetary issues and debt. The debt is just, I've been doing some research on that. It's just completely ridiculous. But nobody's really paying attention to it. Part of it is, I think, people don't want to. The times are good. The stock market is going up, and I have a job, and that's good enough for now. But of course, now is the time to be preparing when you can see the writing on the wall.
You mentioned in your article a major focus on the movie Gold specifically, and you have a unique perspective that I don't have the benefit of, but you were talking about how certain aspects of the movie seemed to you to be true to life as far as the dynamics of the industry at the time, the business at the time. Could you give us just a thumbnail sketch of what you consider like the major insights into the real world of gold production or gold exploration or that sort of thing that you feel like we're captured? Where did it actually capture the spirit of the times and of the industry that as you saw it?
Oh, a great question. I think if you saw the movie or you do go see the movie, it is true that they, there are hints about where good places to explore might be around the world. And he kind of sniffs out this place in Indonesia, and this is all a true story. He sniffs that out and thinks he tracks down a guy that has done some exploration there and had some success, but he felt like it got away. There are certain parts of the story that aren't true. It doesn't take place in Reno. It's actually a Canadian company, and they do change the names and things like that, which I don't know why they did that, because those guys are all dead now. But anyway, they go to Indonesia, and they think they start to drill in what is they think is a prospective area, and you look for on-surface samples of different things that are clues or hints about where there might be gold. They do that, and they don't get anything. The drilling and doesn't turn anything up. Even the workers start to leave because there's no gold there. And then all of a sudden, the next drill result comes back, and there's gold in it, and not just gold, but visible gold. And most gold that you dig up today, that miners dig up, it just looks like dirt. It's just ore because it has metal in it, but it just looks like dirt. You can't see the gold. There's not visible gold in most gold that's dug up today. And that was true in this case too, except all of a sudden they started having some visible gold in their drill results. So it was quite amazing. And of course it grows and grows and grows, and the fun thing was what happened to the stock, and that part was true as well. It was a 30-cent stock when it first went public, and it went as high as $250 US at its peak. It was like an 83,000% return, and I mean that's pretty incredible. But those kind of returns can happen sometimes if you catch them at the very beginning and they're successful and they have that kind of run. It is possible to get 10 baggers and 100 baggers even in the exploration field. So that part is true as well. And of course, and here's the spoiler, but it's all a fraud. It's a total fake. There was an on-site geologist that was salting the samples, which means he was basically just putting in visible gold from the nearby riverbed into the drill samples before they went to the lab. So lo and behold, every time the lab tested, hey, there's a lot of gold in here. So that's because he had been putting it in the bags. So it all ended up to be a fraud, and a lot of people lost money. A lot of people lost their life savings. But I actually knew someone who did invest in the stock, and he didn't know it was a fraud. But he started buying it when it was around, like $1, I think. And he bought it, he said, all the way up to maybe like $10. He was averaging up, if you will. And he sold, he made about 70 times his money, if memory serves me right. So he made a lot of money on it, and he did start to sell. And that was one of the lessons that I tried to articulate in this article, is that you do need to sell someday, and you do need to sell your gold and silver someday if they go in any kind of bubble or something like that. And yes, I know, gold and silver are real money and they're the only money and that sort of thing, but to realize a profit, you will have to sell at some point. And this guy did. He didn't know it was a fraud. It was just getting way overvalued compared to actual producing companies. And so he sold and took the money and ran. He made like 70 times his money on it. So it's a fun story. It's a true story. They do change some things, but that is something to definitely check out if you like movie going.
Well, in your article, you mentioned two specific most important lessons, takeaways that apply outside in general to our decision-making process from that movie. If you could touch each of those for us. The first one you mentioned was about gold stocks, the risk inherent in gold stocks versus in holding gold itself.
Oh, yeah. Gold stocks are total 100% speculations. You're speculating that this company is either going to find gold if it's an explorer or become a very profitable producer if they're going into production. So you're speculating on that. Whereas if you buy gold, you're buying real money. So there's a major difference. And most people that bought Bre-X was the name of the company back in the 90s. Most people that bought it lost money. In fact, there's even a great scene in the movie where Matthew McConaughey is the lead character trying to convince one of his coworkers, hey, sell a little bit, put it aside for a rainy day, make a little profit, and the guy never did. And so he had, hundreds of thousands of shares that were completely worthless when the company went belly up because it was a total fraud. So, that's what's going to happen with gold stocks. You're taking a much different and bigger kind of risk than you are by holding gold. And I have a personal example of this. I didn't own Bre-X, but I've owned other gold stocks that have pretty much gone to zero. And I outlined one of those in the article, even though it's a little embarrassing to me. It's a good lesson for people, of how you can lose money in gold stocks. Now, I've made money in gold stocks too, but it's a different game than holding real money. That's the main thing about that point.
Right. So that distinction is important as people look at, and everybody's at a different stage of life, and everybody's at a different stage financially, and everybody's at a different place of their expectations of risk in general, and the risk that they want to take on, because there is definitely this risk-reward trade-off. So people need to be heads up and eyes open about that as they balance out what their real goals are. We've had multiple guests on saying, like in general, rules of thumb that holding gold producers, if you pick them right or whatever, can give you like roughly a 3-to-1 leverage over holding the base metal itself. But your point is that it's not just a multiplier, it's the actual tangible versus intangible asset that's underlying the whole thing, and your dependence on counterparty business versus your independence from that.
Oh, yeah, that's completely true. And gold stocks do give leverage. If you're making $100 profit on gold at $1,200 and gold goes to $1,500, you're not just making, you're making 3 times more profit now. So that's where that leverage comes in. But there's so many other considerations. The people that are behind the company, the political risk, the operational risk, the risk with metallurgy, which is why I lost in the company I mentioned earlier that's in that article. There's so many risks. And of course, if the gold price falls, you're leveraged the other way. So there's a lot of risk with a gold stock. Now, it can be fun, but I think the point is, you saying it depends on what station you are in life. It really comes down to 2 things if you're going to go into gold stocks. So you have to have the emotional stability, I guess you could say, to handle the ups and downs of these. You're going to lose on some of these things. You also have to have the financial breadth. So you have to have the ability financially to withstand a stock that you buy. And I'm talking about the more risky stuff, the exploration stuff. But you have to have the ability to withstand, a stock that you buy that goes to zero or falls by 90%. You have to have the ability to handle that both emotionally and financially.
Sure. And then you led to another major point or lesson learned from the movie about that you must someday sell. And you mentioned that earlier in this conversation, but if you can talk to us about your thoughts around that, and it not always means rolling it over into the currency of the day. It can mean other things as well. But what was your key takeaways around you must someday sell?
You have to someday sell, otherwise it's on paper. Your gain is on paper. Even if you hold lots of gold and silver and it goes up in value, and it goes up 5 times, 10 times in value, it's not going to matter until you actually do something with it. And I understand there's some people that may never want to, sell their gold and silver, but I do plan to leave this asset class at some point when, and that's a timing question. That's, obviously years down the road. But I do plan to lock in a profit and change my standard of living, improve my standard of living, and to buy other undervalued asset classes, whether it be real estate or stocks or whatever the case may be. There will be plenty of other opportunities and the things that are completely undervalued. So the idea is to sell an overvalued asset class and buy an undervalued asset class with those proceeds. And yeah, the dollar, who knows where the dollar is going to be? Is it going to be zero, or what's it going to be? Or is it going to be backed by something else, or is it going to be conjoined at the hip with other currencies, or is it going to be backed by the IMF, the SDRs of the IMF? Who knows what the status of the dollar is going to be, but you're probably going to have to transact in daily life with some type of currency. And so hopefully that currency is, so low that really you become a millionaire overnight just because the value of gold and silver and how far the currency has fallen.
I can't resist putting a little plug in for something that Mike Maloney, again, at his insider program there at Gold Silver, mentioned years ago, and that is that those people who do join the Gold Silver Insiders get his exit strategy updates as the bull market in precious metals continues to play out towards the blow off top. Mike is committed to keeping people informed, not promising to call the perfect top, because that would be a fool's errand, but to alerting people to potential undervalued asset classes that they should be watching carefully, because he'll be watching the gold, the gold oil ratio, the gold real estate ratio, the gold whatever, so that pricing gold in those other things to where it becomes clear that there's just a compelling story for making some kind of move like that. So I just wanted to remind people that there is expert counsel available. So.
Yeah, he has an insider program. You have to qualify by purchasing enough gold or silver to qualify for it. But if you do, he puts out insider videos, a couple a month, I would say, on what he's doing. We're also working on a dashboard, and your audience is one of the first to hear about it, but we're working on a dashboard of indicators. There'll be 20 different indicators that Mike is looking at that he'll make public to insiders on the website at some point when, that day is getting closer and we're looking at when to sell. We're far from that right now, but it's something that's in the works now. And he also has a couple proprietary indicators that he's not going to make public, but he is going to, like I say, not necessarily try to call the top, but try to be, try to identify when the time is to begin to exit. And we'll probably exit in tranches, sell 20% here, sell 10% now, sell 50% or whatever, when that time, comes. So you capture the biggest possible portion of the gains that you can.
Right.
But yeah, that's exactly what he's going to do. He's not going to tell people, okay, sell now. Yeah. He's going to say, I'm selling this portion of my holdings now. That's what he's going to do. Right, so that's what the insiders is all about.
Well, so speaking of a major shift, if we could shift our attention to what's going on in India. India is one of the centers historically in the world for gold accumulation at the popular level. It's very culturally normal there for people to purchase large quantities of gold for major holidays, to give it as gifts, for just accumulate it throughout life, accumulate it across generations, to wear gold, to own physical gold in your own possession. You mentioned in our country how rare that is. It's not at all rare in India, and those Indian coworkers that I have talk about that quite commonly. And also to hold cash, that the cash economy is very strong historically in India, and a lot of, or most businesses transacting a significant portion of their business in cash. And just in the last few months, we've seen dramatic moves by the Indian government to severely limit people's ability and companies' abilities to transact in cash or hold cash, and also new policies that are discouraging private ownership of gold. And you drew an interesting prediction at the end of the same article, talking about what that could do to silver. So can you help us first understand what's going on with cashless pressure in India, what's going on with the crackdown on gold ownership, and then what might that imply forward about a seismic shift to silver for India?
Sure, that's a big question, but I think your audience is probably aware of that. There's a ban on cash or a cashless society that is underway right now, and it's not just India; it's in a lot of places where, France and all kinds of things. But this is the kind of thing that a lot of governments do before they really want to clamp down and shut the door completely. Remember, World War II, but when Hitler came to power, Germany took away all the guns. So, and that was before the war broke out and before, the Holocaust and all that kind of thing. So these are the kind of moves they put in place before, they want to really shut the door on something. And I'm not saying that's going to happen in the United States or North America or wherever. But the risk is definitely not zero, and I don't trust a lot of government politicians and what they want to do. So anyway, so we're moving more toward that, and it's happened, like you said, it's happened in India as well. What's going on there basically is that India has really tried to clamp down. The government has really tried to clamp down on gold demand, and gold demand there is kind of like demand for stocks and bonds are here. So, most people, when they get a job and they have a 401k and they're put in these, 60-40 plans. My daughter has one at her job, and the typical recommendation is, well, we'll put you in 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Well, if you were in India and they had a 401k, you would be buying gold jewelry with it. It's that common there as stocks and bonds are here. So it's very, very common. Demand is very high. It's usually in jewelry form, not in coin form like here. But it's still, the overall demand for gold is very high. So that's caused some fiscal problems for India. It's caused some growth problems. So long story short, they try to limit it. Where they've tried tariffs, they've tried incentive programs where you invest a certain amount of your gold here and we'll pay you interest on it. Well, a lot of this hasn't worked, but recently it has started to work. And over the past couple of years, gold demand, this year, gold demand has really started to fall in India, which is very unusual because it's a very, gold-centric society over there. So what's happening? Well, are they going to turn away from gold? Are Indians just going to, not buy gold anymore? Well, there's two answers to that question. One is they are doing it underground. So we don't know exactly how bad demand has fallen because a lot of the transactions have gone underground and they're not being reported or done in a dealer where there's tax paid or something like that. But the bigger issue is that all of a sudden silver jewelry in India is soaring. It's up like it's more than tripled just in the past 3 years. So what I'm trying to point out in this article is that, hey, there's a catalyst for silver that is happening under the radar right now. And if this trend continues, we are really going to be seeing an explosion in demand in silver. And the subsequent explosion in the price of silver simply based on India alone with no other catalyst going on. Gold demand is basically flat in India, and it's starting to go down this year. Silver demand in India, like I said, has tripled, and it just continues to soar. Well, if this trend keeps up, there's just not going to be enough silver to go around for India if they convert all, the silver they want to have converted into gold. Or converted into their savings. So if 10% of Indian gold demand shifted from gold to silver, global silver demand would jump by 65%. Well, that's not really feasible. There's not enough silver to do that. And so what I'm trying to point out in the article is just that if silver demand, if demand for precious metals in India shifts from gold to silver, we're going to really have an issue with the silver market. And if you own it, you'll be very happy.
It's been said by many that we've had on our channel that people are really unaware of the comparative scarcity of investable silver to investable gold. They've mentioned such things as that a lot of the investable gold is tied up either in art or religious artifacts or things like that, where it's not likely to come out onto the open market, but that silver has been consumed. That gold, that there is significant bullion storage of gold that could come out on the market if the price was right, but that silver gets consumed by industrial uses and so on, to where it's almost like 1-to-1. In some cases, silver might even be more scarce than gold, above ground investable silver. So if you're talking about a shift of 10% of Indian gold demand turning into a silver demand, and that in alone driving a 65% increase in global silver demand, which is already kind of borderline scarcity. We've certainly seen months in the past couple of years where the mints, the U.S. Mint or other mints, have had to halt production of silver bullion coins because of difficulty sourcing the large quantities of physical silver. So it sounds like you're saying that, and we've even heard some projections recently, and I don't know if, I guess if you could weigh in on them, that some people are projecting that the silver could so far outperform gold in the next period that it could reach much closer parity to actual gold price. I mean, that one just seems astonishing to even hear anybody say that. But what's your view of the possibility of such a thing?
Well, silver will definitely outperform gold. It has historically up and down. So you have to have the emotional fortitude to withstand silver's much higher volatility. It's a tiny market, and that's why it's more volatile, and that's why it'll outperform gold. Here's a good example from we all talk about the 1970s bull market in gold. That was sort of the earmark for precious metals. So from the 1970 low to the 1980 high, gold rose 2,328%. You think, wow, that's incredible, 23 times your money. Silver rose in the same time period 3,105%. So 31 times your money for silver during that time period. So that's a good example of how much more volatile silver is than gold. It will definitely outperform gold. Now, as far as supply, there's actually lots of silver. But the issue is exactly what you said. It gets used up. All the silver, not all the silver, but a lot of the silver that is put into industry, and 56% of all silver goes into industry, most of that is just not economic to recover. It's in small portions. It's been painted on. It's been spray blasted on. It's in tiny specks, and the price of silver just doesn't make it feasible to recover all that, so it's thrown away. So even though last year we almost hit 1 billion ounces of silver supply, annual supply in 1 year, 65% of that is gone. And a lot of that, what's left, is in my safe and your safe, and a lot of institutional safes. Nobody's going to be selling that silver. So the point is there's not enough new supply, like we talked about a few weeks ago, if you remember, about gold. There's not enough new supply coming on if demand were to spike. And India is just one example of that. But there really isn't going to be enough supply if there's a big spike. And of course, I think with the kind of monetary and economic and fiscal and all of that, those situations that we have today in most advanced economies, that we're going to have a crisis, and a lot of people are going to be seeking out gold and silver, especially when they really start to move. And that's when you're going to really see some fireworks, because a lot of people are going to go to buy it, both gold and silver. And it's not that there's not enough above ground stuff. It's that there's not enough available above ground stuff. We're not going to tear down the Sistine Chapel like you were saying earlier. We're not going to, pull out cell phones and try to grab the little bits of silver that are in it, to make into eagles. It just isn't going to happen. And so it's that availability of new metal that we constantly need. We need new metal every year, and we're not going to be getting enough of it if demand spikes. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
Well, Jeff, we're just about out of time here. If you had one last observation or words of wisdom for our viewers before we let you go this evening.
Oh, just that I'm very excited about where gold and silver are going. I'm continuing to buy. Mike Maloney and I and everybody at Gold Silver, we all believe in what we're doing, and we all buy regularly, and we think we're still in an accumulation mode, and we think there's not only going to be a need for them, your defensive plan, but that they're going to rise in price so much over the next few years, probably between now and 2020, to where it could literally change your standard of living. So we continue to do that. Check out Mike's Insider program. We're getting ready to make some changes there. And I am writing, by the way, a little more educational articles now than just a weekly article. So I'm doing more educational stuff, which the company seems to like. So we're going to be doing a little bit more of that if anybody's interested in that as well. So.
Well, Jeff Clark, Senior Precious Metals Analyst at goldsilver.com, thank you once again for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
I love being with you, Dunnigan. Thanks for having me.